When was the last time you dreamed? And what was it about? Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as usual, wherever you are in the world. Jose here, Squeaky Chair, welcoming you to another episode of Amazing Worlds. And this one I have been delaying, I have been putting to the side because I think it's one of the trickiest, if not the trickiest review I have ever done in the channel. I am talking about The Sandman by Neil Gaiman. So my Sandman collection is up there in my Vertigo shelf. So pretty much anything put up by Vertigo is strongly recommended. Sandman is a major milestone in the history of comics, and I'm going to try to do it justice, but I suspect I am going to fail epically, but let's give it a go. So, bit of background. Neil Gaiman, at the time when he started writing Sandman, was not the arch-famous, well-regarded, much admired author that he is today. At the time, he had only written a small, I think it was a 4-issue DC Universe Batman story called Black Orchid, which I've got somewhere up there. And, it was right. It was a little bit different. It gave a little bit of an insight into his mind. Then he was offered to take on the Sandman character that had already existed in different incarnations in the DC universe. The original character was some crime-fighting character written by Wesley Dodds, and later on Jack Kirby and Joe Simon in the 70s turn it into the Sandman of popular myth, the man with the sun in your eyes that brings dreams. That is the character that Gaiman took but completely reconfigured and rewrote for his vision. Trying to explain the plot of Sandman is nigh on impossible, and trying to classify it into a genre is very, very difficult. Because it is not horror, it is fantasy, but not fantasy in the traditional sense that we understand it. It's a kind of an urban fantasy at times, but it can also be a little bit of very whimsical, I suppose, and it's very hard to pigeonhole. It is very much what Neil Gaiman later on became in his novels. So we start with Dream, so a sort of personification of Dream, which is one of the Endless. The Endless are these creatures, these entities that have existed since the beginning of time. They are kind of anthropomorphic representations of human emotions. So Dream is one of the Endless, which are destiny, death, dream, destruction, desire, despair, and delirium. And they're all siblings, and they all live in their own kingdom in some sort of otherworldly dimension. The Sandman begins with Dream being captured by some magicians who accidentally capture him. They intended to capture Death and trap Death, so to stop Death from ever happening again, but they get it wrong, and they imprison Dream for hundreds of years until he manages to break away from his prison. He goes on some sort of magical item quest, so to recover his bag of sand and a mask that he wears, and stuff like that. And it's sort of like a very typical quest for an item story. But once that was done, once that starting of the story was done, then Neil Gaiman was free to explore and do whatever he wanted. So book 2 in the trade paperback is called Doll's House. It explores different ideas, different notions of what dreams are or what dreams may be, and introduce. I think for me, it's one of my favorite stories in the whole of Sandman, where Dream has to stop a convention of serial killers. That's right, just the idea of serial killers sort of meeting and having a convention, and what goes on there is just remarkable. It's the kind of Neil Gaiman thing that we would encounter later, perhaps, in American Gods. Book 2 also introduces us to the figure of William Shakespeare. So you can see all the things that get thrown in there in the mix. We've got serial killer conventions, William Shakespeare, where two of his plays were written at the request of Dream, and also a very minor character called Hobgoblin, who is talking about how he doesn't want to die. He thinks that death is just something that humans do. We just used to do it, and we die because that's something we do, and he refuses to die. And upon hearing that conversation, Dream and his sister Death decide to give this gentleman the ability to be immortal. And then every so often, every certain number of issues, he reappears and he has a conversation with Dream. Is he ready to die? Not yet. And becomes a bit of a recurring character. I've got my notes here just to make sure I do the review properly. So book 3, again, we have William Shakespeare there, and a weird representation of A Midsummer's Night's Dream. And it's a more of a sort of self-contained volume there, exploring dreamlike scenarios and things. Book 4 is quite pivotal as well in the history of Vertigo. In Book 4, Lucifer, the Lord of Hell, ruler of Hell, decides he's fed up, he wants to go to Earth and live life. So he abandons Hell, and Dream, strangely enough, ends up becoming Lord of Hell, but he doesn't want to do it because he's the Lord of Dreams, he's got his own kingdom to attend to, and he has to end up appointing someone else to be the Lord of Hell. And then Lucifer spawned his own comic series, so Lucifer, which was adapted to a TV show by Netflix. So that's where it came from. It came from the first appearance of Lucifer as such was in the Sandman series. The books continue doing weird things. There is Volume 7 is a strange road trip between Dream and his sister Delirium, which is a really interesting character, and how the artists convey her personality through the way that his speech is written on the page was quite interesting and quite novel. I haven't seen anything like that done before. And getting close to the end of book, World's End was also one of my very favorite volumes in the series. So World's End is set around an inn, literally at World's End. It is a place where different dimensions of existence meet, and travelers arrive there and share their stories during a stormy night. For me, it was a very enjoyable sort of high fantasy, very interesting concept collection, and that sort of gives us a premonition of how the series is going to end. Volume 9, The Kindly Ones, of mythology, of Greek mythology. Not harpies. I'll put it in the description. I can't quite remember now, but there are these figures of mythology that exact justice on people that injure their family or their siblings. And finally, the whole thing wraps up in the final volume called The Wake. So, funeral for whom? And how does it end? Now, Gaiman came back. I haven't got them. I haven't read them. To me, the story is complete. But he came back and he added a couple of volumes of short stories centered around each one of Dream's siblings, and he added a little bit to it over the years. The whole series just ran for 75 issues. It proved hugely popular at the time. It is what catapulted Gaiman. And strangely enough, apparently, obviously I wasn't reading it at the time, but it struck a nerve, it hit a chord with the female audience, and it brought a lot of young women, girls into comics, because it's not your usual superheroes beating the crap out of supervillains and that sort of stuff. The themes and the ideas it explores are very, very different. They are very almost metaphysical reflections on history and personality traits and character, which is why it all sounds very, what's the word I'm looking for, like out there, like sort of really highbrow, but once you read it, it is not. It's very difficult to describe, and the best thing I can do is you gotta read this, because it is nothing like you will ever read again or have read before. I was a little bit disappointed with the art throughout the series, the consistency of the art, because there wasn't a consistent run of one artist taking on the character and the art and developing its own style. There's a constant changing, chopping new artists in every volume that there's, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's a bit cartoony, sometimes it's a bit more whimsical and it fits better with the idea and themes and the story. And I was a bit disappointed with that, I have to say. But the story is almost 30 years old now, and I think it's pretty timeless, and I think it's pretty relevant still today by its very nature and by the stories and themes it deals with. Also, it turns out, actually, the idea of the trade paperback originated with the Sandman. So comics used to be published, and either you got them on the monthly issues or however long or frequently they were published, and that was it. And then it was actually the second volume, Doll's House, that was actually the first one sort of put together and published. They wanted to promote her, and that sort of kick-started the whole thing, and aren't we grateful for it. I'm very grateful to Karen Berger, who used to run Vertigo Comics, subsidiary of DC, because that label and the creativity that it spawned over the years, the risks that it took to do different things, to me is unparalleled with anything else. Marvel, mainline DC, anything else. Vertigo, to me, is just the best thing in comics ever, period. That I'm just going to put it out there and say it like that. Now, personally, the problem I have with Sandman, again, and this has happened on a few other reviews I've done in the channel, is that it is one of those series that I have. It was so hyped up that when I read it, it was like, is this it? Is this what all the fuss was about? And it probably warrants and merits a second read. So at some point, I should go back and revisit the Sandman, because there's probably a lot of things thrown in there that you don't pick up on a first read. A character that appeared there, turns up there, like the Hobgoblin thing I got. There's probably a few more things that I missed out on, and probably I'll be able to notice and take better, again, sorry for the redundant, notice of on a second read. Massive fan base. I've seen so many women at Comic Cons with tattoos of Dream and stuff like that. I think even death and the representation of death in the series is sort of fairly unique. She's this sort of nice looking goth chick thing, and different from what you would have normally have associated with death if you were to represent her anthropomorphically, I suppose. But anyway, that is The Sandman. Certainly a very different comic from anything else you could think of. It is definitely a must, even though perhaps it isn't to everyone's tastes. I think Norman Mailer, the great American novelist, defined it as comic strip for nerds. Sorry, so there you have it. That is it. Anyway, this is my very feeble attempt at reviewing and introducing Sandman. I'm glad I've read it, and as I said, I would probably give it another read, hopefully perhaps maybe in 2021, after some time has passed and I want to break the wheel of time a little bit in between. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. I hope you're keeping safe. I hope you're all fine. Things are getting worse and worse here by the minute, so it looks like we're going to spend Christmas at home. There's no going anywhere this time, but we'll watch this space and see how it goes. So please like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you think. Have you read it? Has it intrigued you? Does it tickle your pickle? Spread the message, spread the love, take lots of care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.